Hi, and welcome to the Blueprints to Buildings podcast. I'm your host, Glen Palmer, and on the show, we interview the movers and the shakers in the world of property development and real estate. Now, this show is supported by something very few developers have been quietly using to get their projects funded and sold faster. Now, that's without touching traditional 3D models. It's early, it's clever, and it's shaping how people see off-plan property. I'll leave it there, but if you're curious, message me on Glen Palmer Online on LinkedIn or check out the show notes below. So, on today's show, I'm joined by Elke Harder. Now, she is a realtor based in Ottawa who specializes in multi-generational living and helps families thoughtfully design homes that support independence, connection, and long-term success. It's a niche that's becoming increasingly important in today's housing market. Elke, very warm welcome to the show. Thank you for taking time out of your day to come and chat with me. So appreciate that.
Thank you for inviting me.
You're more than welcome. And I think this one is going to be rather interesting, given the times that we're actually living in. So let me kick off by asking you this. If time travel became a reality and you had a chance to go back in time to when you first started your career, what advice would the person you are now tell your younger self?
Well, that's really interesting in regards for someone like myself. When I look back at when I first started in the workforce, I've sort of done a full turnaround. And so, what I would tell my younger self is take the chances, listen to people, but don't listen to people. Do what's do what's important in your heart. Because I look back at when I was in my 20s and design was a key interest of mine. Always layout, floor plans
Mm,
was a key interest of mine. And there was a certain aspect of multi-generational living, but I don't know if I fully understood or grasped it.
yeah,
And I would take more chances. Sometimes I would be a bit more reserved. I'd want everything to be perfect. And I would just go for it. If that's what I would tell my younger self, just go for it. And you never know
yeah,
where it may lead you. I mean, ultimately, in the end, it's done a full circle, and I'm sort of back to what I call my roots of
yeah,
interest, but I would definitely suggest take the chances, go with what's in your heart,
yeah,
and don't listen to the noise, the naysayers. Just go for it.
yeah. And don't be afraid to make mistakes because that's where we learn,
That's
don't we?
huge.
Yeah,
You learn from your mistakes, not from all the great successes. That comes from the mistakes that you've made
exactly.
along the way.
Exactly. So, Alka, multi-generational living is becoming, a lot more common these days. Perfect example is my sister. She and her husband live with her daughter and her family. So, what are the biggest mistakes families make when they move in together without that proper planning?
Well, it's a very good question. And this is
Yeah,
the
I know it
discussion.
well.
This is the discussions that we're having. I'm finding that a lot of people just think, okay, multi-generational living seems to be something that might solve this particular issue or concern for the family, but they don't have the hard conversations beforehand.
Yeah,
And those are multiple topics, and you're not going to cover every single scenario, but it will give you a foundation to work with. So, for example, um, you want to talk about the finances. Who's going to be on title? Is it 50-50? Is it 30-70? Is this a short-term potential solution, or is it long-term? So living multi-generational doesn't have to be from now until someone passes. It could be
hmm
short term. It could be 10 years or 15 years. Usually I find anyone who's lived multi-generational long for a longer period of time live longer. But you need to have the conversations about financing,
Yeah.
about well, for example, if the adult children want to add a pool in into the backyard, and mom and dad are like, hey, we don't want to put a pool in. We are either traveling half the time, or, we're not big swimmers, or we don't have the funds. I don't know the exact costs, but they're quite substantial if you're looking at an in-ground pool here.
Hmm.
You're looking at least probably 100,000 to start. And that
Wow.
doesn't include hardscaping, and maintenance. And of course, then your utilities are higher. So, sometimes those big discussions need to happen beforehand because my understanding is when I'm talking with other people, they haven't. And therefore, it becomes a, a tension and a conflict within the family. And,
Yeah.
the adult kids might say, well, we think you should contribute X a percent. And mom and dad might say, no, we're not interested. Or maybe they don't have the funds, right? Somebody may have the
Hmm.
funds and somebody else may not. So the foundation, if you've talked about financing, if you talked about how major repairs are going to happen, the daily or monthly utility costs and maintenance of the house, you might have an easier discussion talking about major contributions to the house. You should probably have a separate fund like you would just as a single person or a single family in regards to putting monies away for the
Yeah.
house. Another big thing is space. Like we all need space. As much as we love our family, everyone needs a little bit of downtime, right? And
Yeah.
where does that look like? Is it a room, a bedroom, a living space, an office? How does that look like for everyone? You know, I don't know if you want to have two bedrooms side by side, like mom and dad and adult kids, maybe decide separate sleeping arrangements as well. Just conversations like that to start. And that's to start. There's
Mm.
a lot of other considerations. We could probably spend quite some time talking about that. Um, but you also want to talk about your finances. I mentioned that is
Yeah.
so key because that's a sensitive subject when at the best of times. You just want to make sure that you have those. Um,
Yeah.
are you a morning person or are you working from home? Are you retired? You want to talk about all of those things and what your expectation of how you live versus like I know my daughter lives a different lifestyle than what we do just because we're different people. We have a
Yeah.
lot in common, but people grow and change with life expectations. So it's important to talk
Yeah.
about.
So communication is key. And just adding on to that, you don't just help people buy homes, you help
Oh
them
no.
design their home, how they're actually going to live together. So how do you balance that independence with, the privacy settings, the shared space when advising all these families? Because I think
So,
that's quite important.
well, it is really important. And I think that sometimes the biggest challenge is having families realize these are important discussions to have before you move in.
Most
Uh,
definitely.
it's if multi-generational living doesn't work, it's not usually about the house. It's usually about the lack of communication and understanding of the lifestyle that the whole family's going to be accustomed to. So communication throughout this whole process is really, really the key important factor. And if you don't have the communication, everything else falls by the wayside. And everyone wants to rush in and I want to look at this house and I want to do these renovations. I think what people sometimes don't realize that it's more important to step back and have the conversations. It's important to talk not just to the decision makers. So who are they? Is it
Hmm.
two people? Is it three, four? And not just hearing what they have to say, but the children. They're not the decision makers, but they have certain things that are key, important factors for them. They have kids coming over, they have like their friends coming over. Where is that play space? Is it after school? Is it later in the evening if you have like teenagers? And how does that look in that whole family dynamic? And is there going to, there's a change from when people move in. So I know this one family, they lived longer multi-gen than what I thought. And,
Hmm.
at the beginning, mom and dad were working and were able to help take the kids to activities and stay at home with some kids while they took the son on tournaments and things like that. But now we've sort of switched. The kids are gone. They finished university. They're on their own. Um, and mom and dad are no longer working and they're um, starting to need assistance, and the roles have totally reversed. So, how does that look for everybody in the family? And do you sort of plan that? You may not have that full-on discussion, but to have some sort of understanding what's going to happen. Are you
Yeah.
going to stay in that house? Are mom and dad going to move to a residence? Or are you going to make one of the rooms on the main floor their main bedroom? Having those sorts of plans and ideas and sort of topics that you've spoken a bit about beforehand.
Yeah, I mean, going from my own experience with my sister, um, I knew that it was financial. The main reason why they wanted
Yeah,
to move in together, it made financial sense. But
yeah,
one of the things they didn't think about is um, my niece. She had two younger kids. They were growing up. They didn't go into the future far enough to say,
yeah.
when they are now teenagers, how's the dynamic gonna, one likes playing drums, one likes playing guitar, one likes going to golf, and etc. etc. So it's I think it's vitally important that you do have these conversations early on. It doesn't have to be, thought out immensely, but you need to have them conversations before you go into that. Because now it's turning out that, a couple of years down the line, it's not suiting them anymore,
That's
and
right.
they're having to find alternative accommodation, which is not ideal, but they are where they are. But I think if you had them
Yeah.
conversations up front and them honest conversations up front, they might have been able to deal with it better. So, Alka, from your market perspective, are you seeing more demand for dual purpose homes? So, for example, people working from home now that COVID has happened, there was a large influx of people working on home. So, do you think um, that there is more demand for this dual purpose homes? And do you think developers are actually keeping up with this shift?
So I think the developers have always plans on the side. Like if you go to a developer here, I know years ago there would be they would have an option of a multi-gen floor plan. However,
Hmm.
it wasn't really advertised or noted. It might be sort of in the corner. And I think it actually started with dual purpose versus multi-gen. So it was,
Hmm.
especially after COVID, when we were seeing prices increase year over year, double digits for a couple of
Hmm.
years, which made it, homes were becoming extremely expensive. So developers were providing some of that off to the side. But there's a difference between dual homes. So if you have a legal secondary dwelling unit versus multi-gen, there's different bylaws and requirements. And so it was really geared more towards where someone could rent out the lower level and create some income while they're living in a home. But now we're starting to see more multi-gen options. And I'm going to say in the last 6 months to a year, I've noticed the developers probably in the last 6 months really giving it a hard push. It was around
Yeah,
a year plus, but not heavily marketed. Um, but now we're starting to see it come more to fruition. We're starting to see more floor plans, more people talking about it. I've talked to lawyers about what we call here, and I'm not sure elsewhere, cohabitation agreements. So some of the
yeah,
lawyers are saying, yes, we're drawing up these cohabitation agreements. Some of them are super detailed, such as if, should one person pass, should somebody divorce, and what's really important is if mom and dad have two or three children, but they're living with one. So how does that look like for
yeah.
their estate planning? Uh,
Mm,
so I'm seeing the developers go along this route, and they don't promote these ideas unless they see it being a trend and beneficial to them. Of course, if it makes perfect business sense, why would you not, right?
yeah,
Uh, and we're starting to see that increase, I would say, more noticeable in the last 6 months to a year. So it's been
yeah,
there, but now we're definitely seeing a bigger push for it.
yeah. And then when you're juggling, these multiple stakeholders, in a multi-generational move, what is your process for keeping the communication smooth, making sure that everything flows already? And do you see automation playing a role, sort of reducing that workload a little bit?
So if I have the opportunity to meet with someone before they jump into actually living multi-gen,
Hmm.
we talk about what we've been talking about predominantly so far is communication. I think the importance of the communication is much more a focus than probably any other aspect that we talk about. And from that communication, it trickles down on what we're going to talk about. And
Hmm.
when we do that, it's important to understand, again, like who the stakeholders are and to include the children. Those are very important aspects. And communication goes amongst everyone, goes with everyone. So if I'm having, let's say it's adult children, so the couple and mom and dad, then it's everyone needs to be on that communication. I can't have one
Yeah,
person emailing me and then I respond to them and then three other people are not in the loop, or they may be, but I don't know that. And then things start to fall apart. So I talk with them and saying, when you communicate with us as a group, make sure everybody's on that email thread.
hmm,
If sometimes, we're human, if someone is sometimes missed, I will respond in kind to everyone. Um, because the adult kids may know it, mom or dad may have sent the email, and if I don't include the adult children, they don't know what the response is. They'll get it secondhand. So I'll make sure that I communicate all responses to everyone. So I find that really
yeah,
key. You talked about automation. Um, Automation, it really works for me in the background. So, with all of the technologies that have come up in such a short period of time, it helps me develop my processes a lot quicker and be able to communicate them in a much quicker time frame. And it gets more administrative done, but I
Hmm.
still feel that it's important to communicate with everyone individually. I know AI comes in and they start, it can determine, what's the prioritizes all your email and stuff like that. I still have a hard time with that. I'd like to prioritize my my stuff, but technology really works more in the background, administrative tasks for me.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. And moving on from that, um, AI, it seems to be creeping into pretty much
Yeah,
every single part of business now.
yeah.
Now, in such an emotional people first process like yours, where do you actually think the technology can support without taking away that personal experience? Now, you mentioned a lot about the admin. Is there any more that you could think?
I There's a lot that goes in the background. So for me, it's different as administrative is much more broader today than what it used to be like 25, 30 years ago.
Hmm.
And it's not just administrative, it's marketing, it's research, it's reaching out to other people. It's organizing charts and timelines and checklists. It goes from one extreme to the other. And so I think technology, we've had technology for many years, but the AI portion that comes in has really sped the process up a lot quicker.
Yeah,
What technology and I don't think can replace is that human interaction. Um, every family considering or living in multi-gen, every scenario is so different. You just can't go into ChatGPT and say, give me the answer to this,
yeah.
because it doesn't cover
There's a
every.
logical sense behind it, but there's no emotional, logic behind it, if you will.
No, we have to sit and listen. And it's not listening to a person, it's listening to everyone who's involved in the living scenario. And
Hmm.
then just sit down and sort of make the appropriate suggestions and recommendations. A lot of times it's bringing in different professionals. So, whether it's a lawyer, a financial planner, a mortgage agent, all these other professionals will help advise and guide. But ultimately, in the end, it's the families making those decisions. And I think if we bring in that human aspect, it makes them feel more heard and
Yeah,
understood and will help the family make better decisions.
yeah,
Because what works for one family doesn't necessarily mean it'll work for the other, right?
exactly. Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's what makes people so unique is we have our differences in opinions, don't we?
Oh,
So yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. I don't look. I think AI is a wonderful tool, can help with
Sure.
a plethora of things. But there's one thing that I don't think it will ever replace, and that's that human emotional connection. Um, and it's the same with digital tools like visual walkthroughs and stuff like that. They are fantastic for people in another country to view a property and get immersed in it, but there is nothing like walking into the room and seeing it yourself and having a conversation with the realtor or whoever. So we're in wonderful times with AI, but I also think that that human touch is definitely needed. So yeah,
Well, yeah,
uh,
I could tell you a quick story about that walkthrough.
I'd love that. Yeah.
So during COVID, I had a family. It was multi-gen, ironically. And so mom and dad were overseas. The children, adult children with their kids were living out west and they were all coming to Ottawa. So I would be showing them houses, and the criteria was very specific because they were all going to be living together.
Hmm.
And so I was doing those walkthroughs with an iPad, and they would have a friend who lived not far attend the calls. So I would, be standing in the front hallway, and I was trying to explain everything from the feel of the flooring, what condition the flooring was in, because you can't always see that as well
Yeah.
when you're doing a walkthrough. So my walkthroughs were taking a lot longer because I was trying to not just the hardwood floor. Well, it would be the hardwood floor has a lot of scratches on it, or, the view you can see, the mountains or the trees, or, you would provide a
Yeah.
lot detailed just because you wanted the family to get a sense and a feel of the house.
Of course.
They finally offered on a property. We did have conditions that were accepted. It was further out on the outskirts. The couple that lived here came, and I met them for the first time at the home inspection. And so we're just walking through the house, and she said to me, Elka, the house is exactly as you described it. And I thought, oh, thank goodness, because they
Thank
don't
God.
know until they come in. And
Yeah.
so they explained that to their friends. They off and all conditions were met, everything was okay. And then when I was waiting outside of the house the day before closing, I'm standing there thinking, oh my God, this is the first time they're actually going to see the house. Like it's bought, they're moving in tomorrow. And I'm thinking, what if they don't like it? And I was very concerned all of a sudden. I did everything that I possibly could to convey this house, but you get such a different view in person. You get a
Yeah.
sense, a feel, and a smell. And anyways, I was very fortunate and blessed that when they came and they walked through the house, it was perfect for them. Uh, but it wasn't until just moments before I was meeting them that I realized they've never been in this house. I really
Yeah.
hope they love it. And that's not a regular day-to-day scenario. That's an exception, not the rule.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
there are times, like you said, when we're just going around showing them, is it better to use my phone or my iPad? And I figured
Yeah.
out a process that worked well, and thank
Nice.
goodness they love it.
Well, well done. Well, Elsa, thank you very, very much for coming on the show and chatting to me about your very niche in bit in real estate.
Yeah.
And the fact that a lot of people are now turning to multi-generational. Loved having you on the show to show to speak about your expertise. I just want to take this opportunity as well to say thanks to my listeners and viewers as YouTube as well. Alka, before we end this very, very insightful conversation, if listeners want to get in contact with you, maybe they're thinking about moving into multi-generational living, what are the best ways for people to get in contact with you?
Um, the best ways, two ways, is one, they can reach me directly on my cell phone. They can give me a call or a text so that we can have a call. And
Hmm.
that number would be 613-794-0560. Or they can reach out to me by email, ELKE at Elke Harder. So ELKEHARDER.com.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Elka.
Thank
And
you.
a quick reminder, this episode was sponsored by a PropTech visual platform that is changing how forward-thinking developers plan, pitch, and sell. It's not mainstream yet, but it will be. If you want to stay ahead of the curve, you know exactly where to find me. You've been listening to the Blueprints to Buildings podcast. I'm your host, Glen Palmer, and today I was joined by Elke Harder. Thank you again for listening and watching, and I'll see you on the next episode.